So, to my right, my immediate right, is David Hogg, who is a survivor of Marjory Stoneman Douglas mass shooting. He co-founded March for Our Lives and helped lead several high-profile protests, marches, and boycotts. He has challenged leaders, all leaders, to get over politics and get something done. He asks Americans to stand up, speak out, and work to get to a moral standard here. And he does this regardless of party affiliation. He inspires me every day, and he texts me, and he and I text virtually all the time. But his question is always, what do we do next to get something more done? Next to David is RuQuan Brown. He began organizing to end gun violence after his stepfather and a close football teammate were shot and killed. He advises March for Our Lives and is the co-founder of Love One and Love 100, two organizations dedicated to bring resources to communities affected by gun violence. He is an amazing young man. And Sarah Lener, who is to my far right, not ideologically, is also a survivor of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, the tragedy there in 2018. She has taught for 20 years, the past 8 at Douglas. She co-founded Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence with Abby Clemens and Sari Beth Rosenberg, and Sari is in the audience as well. And Teachers Unified is a grassroots movement of American educators whose mission it is to elevate stories of gun violence in schools and communities and to change the environment, change the climate, influence policies, and make communities safer. And she is just devoted to both her work as an educator and to this work. And for those of you who don't know, Abby's not with us today, but Abby is a survivor of the, I almost couldn't say it, of the mass shooting in Sandy Hook in Connecticut. So without further ado, can I ask you first, RuQuan? Teachers and children are on the front lines of gun violence right now. To be an American is to, well, let me ask it this way. With the last 3 mass shootings, Uvalde, Buffalo, Highland Park, there has been a shift, at least in what I've seen, that everyone is now believing, or everyone I know, that not only could they be touched by this, but this could happen to them, and that there really is a gun culture now. Do you think it's inevitable, or do you think it can change?
Well, I think that, first, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here before teachers and all of the other beautiful people that pour into students, because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the people in my communities who really cared about me, coaches, teachers, and all of the other staff in our schools. And so I'm really thankful. Thank you guys, you deserve that. I know it to be true that no sort of injustice is inevitable, but I also know it to be true that with the current fabric of this country, the injustice is inevitable. And I think that the best place to sort of change that is in our classrooms, because young people spend more time in our classrooms than we do at our homes. And it was in class that I learned what politics are. It was in class that I learned what voting is and those things. It was in class that I learned the concept of community as well. So I don't think that these things are inevitable, but I think that they do take an amount of self-sacrifice that we don't learn about in school. I think it takes more balls from people like myself to be willing to hold Congress accountable, hold our... And finally, and even for the people that are in our schools to hold each other and also hold Congress accountable, I think is what it's going to take.
Thank you. And that leads me to a question for David. Because, you know, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was passed, and then there was another mass shooting. And so you're pretty eloquent on the issue of what is progress. So tell us, what's your view of the Bipartisan Federal Safer Communities Act, and where do we need to go from here?
Look, I think it's progress, even if it's not as much as I would like to see. The reality is, with that bill, we knew if we had to have 10 Republican votes because of the filibuster, that it was going to count on us not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, because we have to focus on saving as many lives as we can right now with the current political situation that we're given. I think it is progress in that it's really what we're working with here is the journey of kind of 1,000 miles. And this isn't even a half step. This isn't even a first step. This is a half step, but it's still progress. And it's more than has been done in 30 years, me and RuQuan's entire lifetimes. The most that's been made at the federal level. And that's because teachers marched with us from AFT and so many other places across the country. It wasn't just teachers, it was janitors, it was coaches, it was nurses, it was all these other people that helped truly make this time different. Because while it wasn't enough, there was also substantial funding in that package for mental health in our schools, billions of dollars. What it's going to count on, though, what I need all of you to understand, and everybody who is watching this at home presumably as well, is that it is going to be essential that we make sure that money is spent on counselors and mental health and not incarceration of our students. Because while understanding the way that we work to eradicate the hatred that is driving many of these things is not through mental health, because people are not born hateful. People learn hatred. They learn racism. Intolerance is learned. It's not born in the first place. And we have to realize that it's going to start in our educational system and teaching our young people about love and justice. And the best thing that all of you can do in this room now that we've passed this law is that we've also passed over 18 at the state level to help change these things and prevent these horrible instances from happening. But I have to know that everybody in this room shows up at your state legislature every single year with us, because that's where this change is going to come from, is your state legislature. So show up there with us to help us change these laws and get our students the resources they need to succeed.
So let me ask, before I go to Sarah, let me ask both RuQuan and David this question. Because David made it very clear before June 11th that, in his view, it was really important for this time to be different, that students and educators marched together. And we have nurses here who marched with us as well. But why don't you talk just strategically why you thought that was so important?
Because we can't do this on our own as students. More than anything, we need the wisdom and education of people that have been in this fight long before us, and also know that they are in danger as well in their schools along with their students. Because parents shouldn't have to ask teachers how good of a shot they are, as we heard in that, when we talked. I remember hearing that. It's crazy, right? We have to work together in this, and we need as many people as possible. We know that the best way for us to get educated and provide the education that we need to train organizers, to train young people, to be the leaders that we have had but have had far too few of, is through our education system. And that's why it's critical we work with our teachers.
Yeah, and I think this is a part that is often left out. My stepfather was murdered when I was 16 years old in high school. I got a call coming home from school that my stepfather was murdered. I had a teammate murdered when I was 15 years old in high school. The first time I lost someone to gun violence, I was 5 years old in Seattle, Washington. I walked the streets of my neighborhoods afraid to lose my life, y'all. These are issues that my teachers don't necessarily experience in my neighborhoods, but they have to experience them through me as the student. People in my neighborhood are not attacking our schools. My neighborhoods are being attacked by very, very, very unjust legislation. My neighborhoods are being attacked by having no resources in our schools and in our homes. And so it's important for us to be here amongst teachers and to walk with teachers and to stand with teachers and to fight with teachers, because you guys need to know how to hold me when my father dies. You guys need to know how to hold hands with each other when your students are murdered. Because in our neighborhoods, I want to emphasize, in Washington, D.C., in Ward 8, in Ward 7, in 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, when young people are being murdered, oftentimes teachers are not equipped to deal with that. And so that's why it's important, so that when you hear my voice, you can think beyond what the news is telling you about deaths.
Thank you. And so I'm going to turn to Sarah. I met Sarah after, and Anna Fusco and the Broward teachers are here as well, and I want to shout them out for the work that they have done. I also want to shout out the Newtown Local for the work that they have done, and their state affiliates, both Connecticut and Florida. But Sarah, I remember meeting you. I think I probably barged into your room. Sarah is the yearbook advisor, and you took on this role of helping students emotionally, psychologically, dealing with this tragedy that happened in February, doing the yearbook at May, and really pulling together all of the testimonials. And then now you're doing Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence. So just give us two things. Give us a sense of how you did that year, and what is propelling you to form this new amazing organization. Everybody knows March for Our Lives. What we want is everybody to also know Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence.
Well, I want to thank you for including me in this panel. I genuinely don't know how we finished the yearbook in 2018. If there are any yearbook advisors out there, you know how difficult that task can be, compounded by what we went through. So we just had to, because we knew it was our story to tell, and we needed to drive the narrative. We needed to show that what happened to us didn't define us and still doesn't define us. It's a part of who we are, but we really worked hard to honor those we lost, talk about who they were and who they wanted to be, and not focus on what happened to them. And it just was a labor of love for 6 very long but very short weeks once school reopened after the shooting. And David was in and out of the room, never a student of mine, but was in and out of that space and saw how crazy it was. As for Teachers Unify, we formed after the shooting at Oxford High School in Oxford, Michigan. Abby Clements, Sari Beth Rosenberg, and I were all in a group chat, and we just decided that enough was enough. What is often left out of the conversation when it comes to gun violence is the voice of the teacher. We are the ones who help the students when they lose a parent. We are the ones who help and move forward after a school shooting. We are dealing with gun violence in our own communities. And it's so important to realize that school shootings, while they get the most media attention, are such a small percentage of the gun violence that occurs across this country. It is gun violence in Black and brown communities. It is gun violence against the LGBTQ+ community. It's anti-Asian, anti-Semitic, domestic violence. Suicide is gun violence. There's so much that goes into it. And even if you, as an educator, have never experienced a school shooting, and I hope and pray that you never do, you are still impacted by gun violence because of where you live, or where your school is located, or where your students live. And it impacts all of us intimately, tangentially. Like, we are all impacted by gun violence, and we knew, the three of us knew that the teacher voice, the educator voice was missing from every single conversation. Lawmakers want to determine what we do in our classrooms. We all do code red and lockdown drills that are traumatizing to us and to our students. And these laws and policies are being made by people who have never stepped foot in a classroom. Don't ask us what we think and what we want, and there's your policy.
So, as you can imagine, I have a ton of different questions for them, but I want to just, we got about 5 minutes left. So I want to just ask you all, you have a group of 2,000 activists here. What do we leave them with in terms of going home on Sunday about what to do? Now, David already said, each year we got to be at the state bodies and really keep moving this agenda. But you, Sarah, just raised the issue about the other gun violence. RuQuan raised the issue about just what happens in a child's life when people that child is close to get murdered. So all three of you, I don't care who goes first, what's our call to action to this group of incredible activists?
Well, I'm really excited to answer this question because I've been thinking about this by force because of the way that I grew up since I was 5 years old. And I recognize that my ability to be here and be a Harvard student and do the other things that I've done, invest in my community, and be what people call an activist, is only because of people like yourselves. It is only because my parents reminded me that I deserved life despite the things that were happening to and around me. It was only because I had teachers who were willing to invest in me beyond the 8 hours that we spent during the day. It was only because I had staff in the cafeteria who were willing to serve me regardless of if I could afford it or not. And so, what my call to action is for you, because I know that you care about your students getting an opportunity to grow into the people that they deserve to be, is to reach out to me so that we can work together, so that I can come to your school and bring my friends to your school to teach whoever needs to learn how to take care of young people. I know from my experience that every educator doesn't know all the things they need to know about how to prepare young people for the world. I've been able to see as a 20-year-old young man in the world of politics, in community, in school, in sports, and more, what it takes. I'm very, very accessible with the internet. My social media handle is on the screen. I'm calling you to reach out to me so that the infrastructure that I've put together through my nonprofit, Love 100, so that we can come and teach you guys and show you guys and guide you guys and answer your questions about how to ensure that young people like me when I was 5 can make it to this point and beyond, because we all deserve life.
Thank you. David.
I think beyond showing up at your state legislatures every year, which if there's one message that you take away from what I need you all to do, it's show up at your damn state legislatures every year, and not just that, but obviously vote, obviously try to get people to run for office and things like that. The other thing I want to leave you with is don't give up on students like me. I have dyslexia and ADD, and I had the privilege of going to some of the best public schools imaginable, And it's very likely that if I did not have that privilege and a mom who has also been a teacher for over 25 years, that I would not be on this stage right now. It is one of the hardest things that I ever had to do before all of this happened was learning how to read. And it was only because of my special education teachers and others who didn't give up on me because they had the resources they needed that I am here right now. So please, 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 do not, as hard as it is, and I've seen my mom, you know, she worked in Title I schools for much of her career. Some of the most important work is in the communities where you will not get credit for it, where you won't have parents that show up at the parent-teacher conferences, where you are helping to serve that role of raising that child. And should you have to do that? Absolutely not, but that's what we're all, unfortunately, that's the reality we face. And it's in those students, it's in those young Davids like me, that real change is possible, and it comes from you, so thank you, and don't give up on your students, and keep fighting for them.
Last word, Sarah.
Oh, boy. I guess the biggest takeaway is to speak up and use your voice. If one of us is screaming, they're not going to hear. If we're all screaming, they can't ignore us.
And with that, I want to thank Sarah and David and RuQuan. This is our future.
And thank you
very
to you all.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.